Hi, gang. Donna here. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Warren Tuttle. He is the author of Inventor Confidential, The Honest Guide to Profitable Inventing. Warren has learned that it is better to be honest in business in order to help others grow through open invention and secure retail interest in their consumer product inventions. He says that there are too many unethical companies who simply take inventors' money and don't get results. Warren has learned that it is better to do life. This is the better way to do life and business by being ethical than unethical. So, hi, Warren. How are you doing? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
So let's talk a little bit. I was on your website. Um, I didn't notice that you really invented anything. Is that correct?
I am not a very good inventor. I'll be honest. Have a long career in product selection. I used to be a buyer at a New York City department store. I had my own retail stores for many years. I was always good at picking out new products. Like, for instance, are you familiar with the Nespresso
Yes.
coffee system? For instance, I launched that in America in the mid '80s.
Nice.
In my store I've selected. So I always had a good eye. I have a good rapport with inventors because I know the marketing and business end, but I am not an engineer. And I have tremendous respect for those who are. My own attempts to invent have cost me a few bucks.
But you understand the process. That's where I guess I'm going, because if you're going to help other inventors, you kind of have to understand the process, correct?
Yeah, it's true. I'm a little bit like a little league baseball player that couldn't hit a curveball. But having said that, I am very involved in the process. I'm very knowledgeable about sourcing, fulfillment, marketing, all the things to take it to market, and also how to evaluate the worth of the product and so forth. So, yeah.
That was one of those things I noticed also on your website. It talked about how you helped launch several products, and one of them was, the quote overnight success. My question is, was it really an overnight success, or was there a lot of work behind that and a lot of push in a few years, not just one day, boom, everything hits?
Yeah, there are no shortcuts, and that's one of my little pet peeves. I use an old high school expression for people who try to sell inventors on the fact that gold mines and millions are right around the corner, and it's very easy. All you have to do is sort of come up with an idea and send it in. It just doesn't work that way in real life. I'm not saying it's completely impossible. There are people that win the lotto, so I can't say that it never has happened. But my book is pretty much dedicated to doing things the good old-fashioned way. Those overnight successes usually take years. Inventors are very similar to artists in a lot of ways, very similar to musicians, book writers, artists. Usually it isn't your first hit. You usually, I think Jack Nicholson did, 10 or 12 years of movies before he was discovered.
Yeah.
It takes time.
And I think, everybody's hot right now. TikTok has those yoga pants, and that was just a big thing. The thing about blowing up that quick is you also crash really quick.
Yeah, that can happen. It's like a drag race, and it's you aren't always in control of your destiny. So I like to say inventing and innovation is organic. I have a line in my book. I said, "Are you a biologist or a chemist?" I am not a chemist. Chemist is someone who puts ingredients together and expects an outcome. Biologist, you plant a seed, it grows. Hopefully, you plant a lot of seed, and then you focus on the ones that are growing. And that's a little bit more the invention process. Get it started, see where it goes, drop the bad ones, focus on the good ones, and move ahead organically.
And that's important. I mean, I want to go back to, and I know you know this, some of my listeners may not, but the pet rock. I mean, I remember seeing the pet rock, and I thought, and I was a kid then, I remember looking at that going, that's pretty cool. But I was a kid. As an adult, I'm like, that was some really marketing genius there. A rock in a box?
It was. I like to say that inventors solve problems, and most good inventions are a problem solver. But I will also put the caveat in that they can improve your quality of life. Now, if it makes something easier, like if you could invent a lawnmower that would do the lawn in half the time, it's going to give you more quality of life. But there are those things that, like the pet rock, that just brings a sort of a soothing calm over, especially those of us who have a lot of high-strung anxiety. So I guess there's value to that, and it must have appealed to enough people. I don't completely understand it, but I do give them credit.
Yeah, I mean, as a kid, I was like, well, why wouldn't I just go outside and get a rock and call it a pet rock? But,
Clearly, we're thinking too much.
clearly.
That's the thing. It's funny. I've had products which I just thought were going to be a sure hit, and others that came out of nowhere. So sometimes you don't know at the end of the day. That's why you do have to do a lot of consumer testing, and you really need to vet your marketplace. But somebody must have done it. I can tell you, with the what was the robe? You mentioned it before. The one that was the big hit. The robe that.
Oh, the yoga pants with the butt
That's
on
the
TikTok.
the one before. Anyway, they did a lot of testing before they rolled that product out. I'm sure TikTok's a little bit more organic, so it's probably a little bit more youthful, where people just charge into things. But I can tell you on some other things that you would be surprised with. They didn't just come out of the blue. They do a lot of testing behind the scenes to see what consumers will buy before they roll those things out.
Well, and it's not just in the product market. They also test market TV shows and music and everything else. I mean, things are tried out a lot before. Even as an author, I have what I call beta readers. And those beta readers get my book before it goes to the editor, so I can see if the story works. And then after it goes to the editor, it goes to ARC readers, so they get an advanced copy to review. Yeah. So there's all that marketing.
True. Yeah, very much so. By the way, it was Snuggie. Sorry, I had a brain lapse there, but
that's okay.
Snuggie, you would be surprised because nobody would have figured that would have been a hit. But the company, I know the people that brought that out, and they did a lot of testing, so they knew. But you're right. You need to get that feedback. And I made a huge mistake. One of my chapters in my book is about my biggest mistake, that I put a lot of money into a product that everybody told me was great. And guess what? It bombed. And so you don't know until you get it out there into the consumer marketplace or do a lot of consumer testing and research.
How many people have you known that have come to you after the fact that said, I wish I would have met you before, that have been taken advantage by an unethical company?
Oh, hundreds and more. I mean, I meet and for some reason connect with a lot of people. I think it's because I run these open innovation programs for multiple companies, and then my sort of place with the United Inventors Association is a large nonprofit, and so people come to me. I oftentimes will get 20 submissions in a day, and I do try to take time out to help people, and I get it all the time. It's eventually why I wrote the book, because I, wanted to tell the full story, but people do seem to appreciate it, and now that the book is out there, I'm getting a lot of nice. America is great. You get thank you notes. I mean, there's always some jerks. The vast majority of people are wonderful and are sending nice thank you notes to you. So I do get that a fair amount.
Nice. So I'm not going to name names of TV shows, but pretty much anybody's going to know what I'm talking about. There's a TV show about inventions that's been pretty widely popular. How do you feel about that? Is it a worthwhile thing, or is it just kind of infotainment?
Well, it's very interesting. I remember when it started. And we're at the UIA, we're a nonprofit, we're very pure, okay? We're as lily white and pure as the day is long, We sort of see the bad in everything. And so when it first came out, the question I had to ask myself, does the show exploit people? And sure it does. And then you have to ask yourself, are people willing to be exploited, and is there a benefit to being exploited? And the mass popularity of the show is absolutely. So the show, to some extent, is not entirely real. It's entertainment. I don't think I'm saying anything out of school, because when you watch it, and it's been taped, many months previous to when it airs, people are sometimes given offers or bids, or they make an agreement, and those agreements don't necessarily materialize. So they may not be real. So there's some entertainment value, and then even if those deals go ahead, the products aren't always successful. So we don't always know that. So in terms of the mechanics of it, I could be a little nitpicky about some of that, but I just had a good friend that was on the last episode of the year, and he got a deal with Damon John, loves Damon. They're doing things together.
Nice.
It really encouraged me. I know Aaron Krause, who did Scrub Daddy, which was a big success. So there's a lot of good stuff that comes out, and I would say at the end of the day, it's a very competitive environment. And for anyone that can get through that process and get on the show, you will have stories to tell your grandchildren. So overall, I think it's a good thing.
Well, there's that old adage of no press is bad press. So, I mean, it's exposure, like you said. And, if you want to take it back to Andy Warhol saying everybody's famous for 15 minutes. So if you can get yourself out there, and it's free marketing.
No question about it. It's very, very competitive today. Where it used to be thousands applying, now it's tens of thousands.
Wow.
And my friend who was on, Chris Guerrero, had to actually quarantine for 10 days at a hotel in Las Vegas in his room, couldn't leave his room for 10 days.
Wow.
Because it was right in the middle of COVID. So, but the show is immensely popular. It's really hit a chord. I watch it, but not all the time, because frankly, it's what I do all day long. And I usually am looking things through a little bit different prism. And I do try to, give a little bit more feedback to people and so forth. I also have only certain areas of expertise. I stick to housewares, hardware, and direct response television products. I don't try to be an expert on everything.
And that's better. I mean, it's better not to say you're an expert in every field, because then you come up short. So it's better to know your niche.
Yeah, exactly right. And there's just so many people that weigh in on things they're not familiar with. I like to stick to what I do, because I have more confidence in telling people this is not going to make it. Save your money and put it into something else. So many times people who help inventors sort of prod them along, and they're clearly on the wrong track. And after they spend thousands of dollars, they come to me with something that never should have arrived at my doorstep. And I'm the one for free that has to tell them it's not going to make it. But part of what I've learned to do over the years is how to say no in polite and nice and hopefully positive ways, so that people can take something out of it. And then let's face it, many famous inventors have worked on many projects, many of which have failed, and it's only those one or two that made it that people hear about. So watch your money and keep up the hard work.
And that has to be very hard for you, because I'm sure you build a relationship with some of these people, a tight relationship, and then to be able to have to tell them, I'm sorry, this isn't going to work.
It's very hard, but it's like jumping into that cold pool in the morning. You just do it, and the quicker you do it, and the more upfront and the more honest you are, and the quicker you have that dialogue, the better off I think that you are. There's usually 8 or 10 recurring reasons why a product may not make it. They might include, it's been done already. Have you checked the Amazon market? To, you've solved the problem, but it's only a problem for you. No one else really cares, to, you need to do more research and vetting. And so I try to pick out the appropriate recurring themes and let people know in a positive way. Sometimes those emails go back and forth, but usually people are wonderful. And then there's always someone who, I sent out 6,000 emails recently about my book, and I got an email back from a woman that I helped in 2012 who was cursing at me, told me to take her off the mailing list, and that I was the scum of the earth and blah, 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 blah. And I went back and I looked at her email exchange. It was because she only had an idea, and I told her that it wasn't going to make it to market, and we went back and forth for 8 emails. This was like 9 years ago. So she still has this pent up, So I have it up on the wall just to remind me that no matter how much good you do, not everybody appreciates it, and keep your feet on the ground and your chin up. But I try to do it in a nice way that people do not get upset at the end of the day. But people need to hear, and that's part of my role.
Yeah.
I'll give you another great example. Not that you asked for one, but one of my biggest failures was a saucepan stirring device. You can read about it in the book. I helped invent it. I helped with an engineer put it together, and it went on a pot. It had adjustable arms, had a drop-down paddle. It could stir risotto or puddings or soups or anything that requires stirring, so that you could be freed up to do other things in the kitchen. We sold 100,000 pieces at a show to get started. Everybody loved it, and then it bombed entirely. Well, 2 years ago, I was doing a pitch panel. I was the professional expert on a pitch panel in Minnesota at a convention, and a person comes up to pitch their product, and what do they have but a stirring device, a saucepan stirring. And I put my hand up as soon as I said, you cannot pursue this. Okay, I've lost hundreds of dollars on it, more even, and you cannot. I'm just telling you, please. There's no interest in this. I've been through it. No one's more of an expert on stirring devices than me. And he wouldn't listen. He kept arguing with me. And finally, after he presented, I made it a point to go around. His wife was at the booth and pulled her aside to talk to her to make sure that she was keeping a close eye on it. And they did not do what I did, which was put your family, money and savings into a product that wasn't going to make it. And that's a little bit why it's personal to me and why I care so much and why I wrote the book.
I think one thing that people don't realize, whether it's inventing something or even going into business for yourself, having a brick and mortar store, there's the insurance aspect. I have that background, and I can't tell you how many claims we used to get from product liability, because I was a TPA for a large department store. So
which one, can I ask you?
I'll tell you later. I will tell you later. But I mean, the thing is, those products, you have to look at a product defect. And is it a product defect, or is it a person that did something? I mean, we had a case, I will state this one. We had a case where somebody took an electric heating pad and put it in a microwave oven, and their kitchen caught on fire. And they wanted us to pay for the fire damage.
Yeah.
Well, this is why you have those warnings on those labels.
That's right. I know exactly what you're talking about. And I even went to a court case once on one. But people aren't always rational, when it comes down to it. But hey, listen, it's part of what you deal with. And by the way, you bring up a good point. When you develop a product and you go to market and you take it to market, you have to think about all those things, not just the product, but all the instructions, all the warranties, all the customer service, all the 800 numbers to service. There's a lot involved. And I do talk a lot in the book about going to market directly and what's involved in doing that.
And I think people should pursue their dreams. I believe that 100%. But I've noticed a lot of fairs I've worked that people are making lip balms and bath salts and everything. And it's like, I want to say to them, do you have the insurance? Because, before I had that, in fact, my faux pas, when I was doing events, I decided that I was going to make candles. And I had already had the insurance background. After I made all these candles, I was like, wait a second. You're going to have to find insurance, and the liability because of a flame, forget it. So I decided not to do it. But there's so many people that don't look at that aspect. They think I make the product and I put it out there, and whatever happens, happens. But like lip balms, if somebody puts that on and has an allergic reaction to it, there's an issue.
Well, that's why you probably want to license your product to a bigger company that can take care of that. But funny you bring up candles, because one of my first projects when I was helping inventors was a woman from West Virginia who invented a self-extinguishing candle, because there are about 20,000 home fires a year because people don't blow out their candles. I always wondered, I did some research. Why don't people blow out their candles? Well, it turns out they light 10 or 12 candles around the house. They blow out 11 of them and they forget about, one. So I actually went to Yankee Candle up in Massachusetts and pitched the product and I learned a lot about the candle business. Interesting business.
What's interesting? I mean, I had a friend who I gave a candle to, and she's like, well, the candle popped. I'm like, well, how did the glass broke? I'm like, well, it turned out that she had been taking the matches, lighting the candle, and then dropping the matches in there.
Yeah.
So at a certain point, you have way more than the little flame. You have this fire. Yeah. So that exploded the glass. But it's one of those things where people, even that, I was at Kohl's once, and this lady was returning candles. I know. How do you return?
She had burned them, right?
She had burned them, and there was black soot around the glass. So she wanted to return them, and they returned them.
Great. It's great because I used to be an assistant store manager. And they didn't have a receipt, and you don't even know where they came from, and they weren't even yours. And then you say, well, sorry, we can't take it back. And the next thing, they write a letter to the president of the company, and they call you on the carpet that you didn't handle it right. So just give them whatever they want. They've learned that, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, it was always back as long as I can remember, it was always the customer is always right. My friend worked at Barnes & Noble, and near the end of the store, our location was going out of business. So people had bought books and everything. This older lady comes back and she's got a copy of Romeo and Juliet. And she's like, I'd like to return this. And she says, why? She said, because I didn't realize that there was two suicides in it. Sorry, spoilers if anybody didn't know that. But she's
And a
like,
couple of fake ones too.
yeah, I mean, you didn't know this? You didn't know. So I want my money
Well,
back.
no, you know the deal. If you've been in
Yeah.
retailing, you know the drill.
Yeah. I just, when you look at some things, it's just like, and Amazon allows them to return your book. They can read the whole ebook and then return it. It's like,
Well, that's why most companies today, and if you're going to market yourself directly, just negotiate a return percentage right up front. Let them take it right off the top. So you take 3% net it right off the bill, and then you don't have to deal with them again. But I hear you, because there's nothing like returns. And by the
yeah.
way, I used to two tricks on that front. So with my product Misto, my big hit product I talk about in the book, which is an olive oil sprayer. I don't know if you can see it here. Sorry, the lights.
There we go. Okay.
We pulled was, since you know retailing so well, we used to sell it to Bed Bath and sell it in retail at $19.99. And if anybody broke price, we'd have to yell at them because Bed Bath would want markdown money. And then TJ Maxx wanted to put it out at $14.99, and they wanted to order like 100,000 from us. And we were like, I'll tell you what. And so I came up with this brilliant plan to take perfectly good Mistos and put a label on the bottom that said refurbished. And then we sold them all. They were perfectly fine. And then when Bed Bath was screaming at us that TJ Maxx was selling for $14.99, and by the way, paying more than Bed Bath to us for it, we just said, "Oh, those are refurbished ones. They're not real." And they said, "Okay."
Jeez. But that's the thing. Sometimes, in order to get your product out there, things happen. I mean, in the publishing world, and you have a paperback, and I see it is through Amazon, and I have been playing this game for the last 2 weeks that my first book is in paperback. And one day, it was 2 days ago actually, the paperback was less than my ebook.
Oh,
I'm
really?
like, how's this? So I contacted them and like, well, it's in the terms of service. We can do whatever we want. I'm like,
Oh, really?
okay. So, so then I posted it because I'm like, all right, might as well sell some books then. Two people bought it, and then the next person that went to buy it, it was back up to regular price. I'm like, okay. So then I checked yesterday and it was down to $5.76. So I posted it. One person bought it. It went up to $11.77. I'm like, how do you market that?
That's the matrix, just like airplane tickets.
Yeah.
They go all over the map, but when you call in, and no, it's been an interesting experience too. I'll tell you, the other one is the review process. And by and large, the star review process is nice because you can learn more about products. I have 62 reviews, 57 of them, 55 of them are 5-star with wonderful write-ups. And then I pissed off a few people that I've written about in the book.
Uh-huh.
And they've literally come in under false names with 1-star reviews that have nothing to do with what's in the book, attacking me in the book, strictly because I call out, some of these companies and some of these individuals, and I know who they are, and it's really frustrating. That whole coming out in the public and being part of the Amazon domain is a fascinating experience.
It is. And what always because I'll look at other people's reviews, and what gets me is I didn't want to read a romantic suspense, but yet the book said it was romantic suspense. Well, so I don't understand.
Yep. I didn't write the summary for my book. I didn't write. The publisher wrote it, and I tried to edit it, and they didn't really want to edit it. So I was like, okay, whatever. But no, the whole thing is it's it's a little bit unnerving too. I mean, I have pretty thick skin. I can handle pretty much anything. But when someone comes into a false name and starts attacking you and laying, and they don't do anything about it, it's very frustrating. But anyway, such is life, right?
Well, yeah, and I mean, here's a whole thing on Goodreads, which is an Amazon-owned company, and it's all about. Are you familiar with Goodreads?
Yes, a little
Okay.
bit. Yeah, yeah.
So apparently now there's a scam that people can come in and say, "Hey, they start leaving you 1-star reviews, and then they send you a message saying either pay us or we're going to destroy your career."
Right, right. Great.
Okay, And
Yep,
then
love America. Yeah.
Goodreads will take it down, and then they'll redo it again. So
It's a welcome to America.
yeah.
So, but it is. I'll tell you what. Having written the book though now, and it is an experience. I don't know that I'm going to do it again, but it's a bucket list experience.
But I mean, if you've gotten positive reviews and people are learning something from it, then besides being an experience for you, it's a gift to the other people.
Yeah, it's nice to give something back. It really is. I've been blessed overall. Had a few failures, but overall, met some wonderful people and done well. So, but my wife is an English major, very literate, works for a magazine, and can't believe that I'm the first one with the books. So I get continual grief about that. She also got me like a little hat, Sherlock Holmes hat with a pipe. Now that I'm an author.
Nice. So, what was out of everything you've seen? You don't need to name names or anything. Out of all your experiences that you've had with helping other people, what is like the worst thing you've heard from somebody that I guess was taken advantage of?
Oh, as far as taken advantage of, well, I have so many stories, but I'll tell you one that sort of sheds a little light on it. I was once asked to come to Reykjavik, Iceland,
Okay.
to speak to the Royal Icelandic Inventor Society. And of course I said yes, they were paying my way. I actually went to the embassy
Nice.
for a little cocktail party and everything for this event. And we went out to dinner one night. I did a bunch of lectures and helped a number of inventors on the ground. And we went out to dinner, and they seated me next to a woman who started to tell me her very sorry story, how she had taken all of her retirement money, which was about $25,000, and put it entirely into with an invention submission company, who will remain nameless, but they are out of the state of Pennsylvania. And they didn't come through for anything. They didn't do anything they were going to say. And she was, by the time she finished telling me the story, she had her head on my, and she was crying so much that my shirt sleeve was completely wet,
Mm-hmm.
And she had signed these contracts, and it was way too late for me to do anything to help her. And I remember just feeling so horrible about that. And it really rang true to me. And I coupled that with my own experience of having failed on a big business venture. And I think it brought home to me, just trying to help people, at the end of the day. And what happens is there's a lot of failure in inventing. So a lot of people who go out to help inventors who want to make a living start charging them up front, because if they wait for a success, it never happens. So then pretty soon, to get more clients, they start boasting about their prowess and ability to make millions and find gold mines and all this other crap. And it doesn't happen. And I even saw one today that makes six-figure income, help me. I'm like, the odds of that are 1 in 1,000,
Yeah.
and so I think those things all coupled in me to come up with a business model. And that's what I've done, which I actually run programs for companies, and they pay me. So I don't have to collect money from inventors. So I'm allowed to freewheel, help with my nonprofits. And then when an inventor comes in and I work with them, I'm being paid. So I don't have to worry about cash flow. And I have a whole section in the book in Inventor Confidential called Cash Flow, and why people go down the wrong path with that. And then the people who do charge and are very clever, then they come back and try to copy me by setting up organizations that look like nonprofits but aren't. They're just funnels. And it's America, like you just discussed before, and they're doing all these things. So I get a little frustrated with it, but the only thing at the end of the day is stay on the straight and narrow and keep telling the story, and hopefully help as many people as I can.
Well, and the one thing I would advise, and this is from dealing with somebody in the marketing aspect of business, when there's an NDA in the contract, which is typical, be a little leery, because you won't see a bad review because there's an NDA there, and they'll take their money, and you won't get what you need.
Yeah, you really have to vet it, and I preach over and over, and I suspect it's the same in your arena. Find out as much as you can about who you're about to pay, and what is their real success rate. Ask them. If they hum and they haw and they can't give an answer, that's not a good sign. I nailed one of these people once in a public conference to give their success rate, and they couldn't do it. So that's a very simple question. How many clients have you had? How much have they paid? And how many have they have been successful? By the way, the definition of success is really simple. How many have made back more in royalties or whatever they didn't get to market than they paid you, for your advice? And that's a pretty low threshold. So that's where I would start. And then I would, when they say that they've helped this person or that person, because sometimes they try to overrun you with numbers because they've had thousands and thousands of students, and maybe there's a couple that have gotten to market. Find out about those products. Have they actually been successful? When you really start to bet down on them, a lot of them maybe got to the shelf but never made it. So the odds are long. I don't want to discourage anyone, but just have your head on a swivel and be ready, because
it's true though, because I mean, you can go to somebody's website and the website looks totally legit, but if you really start digging, you may find holes in that image, and it makes you very aware.
that's right.
So
You have to dig. You got to dig. You got to be curious. And inventors oftentimes are easily separated because they're engineers, and they're a little geeky, and they worry about problem solving, and they're not really into the marketing and the money end of it. So they're easy prey, and they seem to also idolize people like big names in the industry. They seem to think, and by the way, these big names are completely, these things that they say are successes. I know one boasts about his biggest success on a video, which I know the person that bought his patent and lost millions of dollars and never had any marketplace success. So, they're easily misled, I should say, and very, very highly naive. And it's just it's a fertile ground for taking people's money.
which, okay, then I'm going to lead us to another little place. It's not really about invention, but it is marketing and it is about sales and products, and that's these pyramid schemes, whether it be nails or, cosmetics, Herbalife. I mean, how many, and people are like, oh, well, no, it's not a pyramid scheme. And I mean, even essential oils, it's like, but it is. It is.
Yeah, and you hope on those big scales that the government's involved. Problem is with the inventor world, it's too small and under the radar. There are rules and laws, but nobody's really out there policing it. But hopefully those big guys, you hear investigations someday because you're talking about millions, if not billions of dollars. But yeah, it's the same for weight loss programs. It's the same for property flipping. It's all out of the same school. It's all selling that magic potion off the back of the covered wagon in the 1800s. They're all descendants of the same covered wagon guy. I'm telling you right now.
It's true. I mean, and I look at people and they're like, oh, well, it's not a pyramid scheme. And I'm like, but isn't it?
And then the thing is, you gotta keep your head on the swivel. You gotta investigate. You gotta ask questions. But and by the way, sometimes inventors don't want to know the definition of success. I did a video recently. I do a lot of videos that I put out, and I'll get a typical number of views and hits and likes. And I put one out last week on what is success for inventors, and it had about a third of the number. I sometimes think they don't want to know what success is. They're so engrossed in just the game and inventing something that when it comes to prime time and making money, they don't sometimes really want to, I think, subliminally. I don't know. It's really weird. So,
Well, if we have to define for some people, this isn't, I think for some people, when you define success, it puts more fear into it, because what if it's a more tangible thing that
yeah.
I may not make this, and that can take the wind out of somebody's sails.
Real fear. You're right. It's fear of failure. You're right.
And
so so that's why I probably won't sell as many books as the guy who's selling gold mines.
But I had a guy who was talking about stress and everything, and he was talking about how his son left high school, or when he was leaving high school, his son didn't know what he wanted to do, and he's like, well, look, I'm going to pose this question to you. What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? And he's like, I don't want an answer now, but just go think about it. And it's a really good statement, because it makes you think of, it takes that little 4-letter word out.
Yeah.
And I think that's very empowering.
I would agree with you. And I have a section in the book about anxiety. I grew up with it. I have an acronym called SIAM. If you read the book, it's Inventor Confidential. I'm told I'm supposed to repeat the name of the book, which I never do. But it's there's a chapter called SIAM, SIAM. Stop, identify, address, move on. Okay. And you really, when you're feeling nervous and anxious and down, and the end of the world is stop and take a deep breath and try to identify what the issues are. And then that's not always easy, as you probably know. Sometimes you think you're not paid enough, or your boss yelled at you, and it's usually something much deeper than that. But it's deeper. You got to find it, and then when you find it, you need to address it. And if you keep doing that repeatedly, then you can eventually move on in peace. And I say that to inventors. You should do that every day as you run into obstacles with what you're doing. And I address them all, because if you go skipping through life, merrily not addressing anything, you're not necessarily doing yourself any favors.
No, no, and I think a lot of people, because we are so wound up with getting constant data and constant information thrown at us, that we don't necessarily take the time to calm ourselves and step out. And that goes back to what we're talking about. Some people not listening, wanting to hear that message and wanting to vet things because they're so inundated with everything else that maybe this invention that they're doing is the only passion or pleasure they have in their life.
That's right. You're right. It's like the pet rock. Back to the pet rock. They're doing it because it's a pet rock, and there's no rational reason, but it makes them feel better. So if you have enough money and that's what you want to do, that's great. You can skip my book. But if money matters to you, and it also gets into that subject of fear, as you were talking. It made me think again. Fear. Anxiety, the best definition I ever heard of anxiety is fear of the unknown multiplied by how important it is to you. So anxiety is fear of the unknown. You don't know what's going to happen, but is it important to you or not? If you can relax and it doesn't matter and the money doesn't matter, you're cool. But if it matters and you're stressed, you got to break it down. So the antidote: stop, slow down, identify, mechanically move ahead. So.
And I think, you providing this book, the Inventor Confidential, I think that's actually something that is needed, because if you have an inside track to be able to help somebody and give them information on how to build their product, how to do this, then there's an audience for it. Because, I can't tell you how many times, something broke in my house. Oh, I'm going to go on YouTube and I'm going to look it up, and
right.
I learned how to fix it. May not be perfect, but I fixed it.
I love those YouTubes. I love it. Yeah. Well, there's so much information today, and
exactly.
And then of course, it's harder to vet. It's almost harder in a way today.
Yeah, I mean, there's certain things that you look at and go, well, there's no way that's going to work. And if they don't show you the whole video, then yeah, this is true. It won't work. But if you're paying attention and you know exactly what information you're looking for, such as if you're an inventor and you want the inside scoop, there's something there for you.
Well, absolutely. And I'm also involved with the United Inventors Association. We're a nonprofit. Just Google United Inventors Association. We also have many, many videos and from really well-intentioned people that are trying to give back. So there's a whole bunch of resources for people if they really want to take the extra all free resources if they want to take the time.
And I know that I don't even know why I'm going to bring this up, but my husband's grandfather actually invented a couple of things. I don't remember what they are. He's no longer with me for me to ask, but we actually have a couple of patents running around. So, I mean, and that's the other thing. Let's talk about that. You invent a product, but there's a whole process to this product. It's not just, hey, look, I invented a pen. You have to, besides the liability insurance or product liability insurance, what else do they have to look?
Oh yeah, I mean, I go into at length product development, both mechanically, what you need to do to build prototypes, improve function, because it's very important. It takes more than an idea and a chicken scratch on a napkin. And then what you were just referring to, patents. We have had since the beginning of this country a patent system, and it's gone through its twists and turns, and some of the big companies don't like it anymore, but it does help small independent inventors. And if you can come up with a novel way to solve a solution and you can patent it and get that approved, which usually takes several years and several $1,000s, then that can be your product and you can exploit it. The book goes into a lot more because it's a little bit more complicated, but building prototypes and patenting, what we call intellectual property, are both really important steps in the proper development, and not just flinging your ideas around and getting them stolen or having them, fall flat on the ground.
And I think that's a lot of things when people actually, they may have a good idea, and that's one thing they have to think about and remember. You may have a great idea, but if you don't have that patent in place or starting to put that patent in place, you're not really protected.
Well, that's right. And so you have to again, make decisions as you go forward with how much money you have in your budget and so forth. But you don't want to necessarily run right out and do a patent initially, but once you do a lot of work and you come to the conclusion that you have something that's very unique and patentable, then you want to pursue that. And I do describe that a lot in the book, the different forms of protection. And first half of my book is basically dedicated to all the mechanical stuff like that on how to do. The second half is all the scammers, the things you have to beware. I have one section called Beware, and then I have another one, Be Aware, which
Yeah.
is things like Kickstarter and trade shows and stuff like that. And then at the end, I give everybody in America something to do to make our innovation ecosystem better, right from the Supreme Court to department stores to consumers to Congress, because we have for 200 years been the most innovative country on the planet. But if we don't watch out, we're going to lose that role. And when big companies swoop in and take over the system and change the patent laws and weaken them and make it easier for them to steal your ideas, that may help them this year, but it doesn't help the next great, Facebook,
Right.
or Google, or any of these things that are in the garage right now that'll be the next year's big hit. So we need to keep being who we are in America. Now we know there's a lot of shysters and thieves, but the other part of us is we're very innovative and very. It's a wonderful country to go to the top into. So looking upward, we need to continue that.
You mentioned Kickstarter. What is your impression of Kickstarter?
I actually really like it. I like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, the other platforms. As someone who is a young person, had to raise capital to start my own store and had a very difficult time with the bank with no collateral and all that. Kickstarter is an opportunity to raise funds from a wide variety of people who put in small amounts and get your project off the ground. Now it's gotten much more sophisticated, so you probably need help today in preparing the right videos and mechanically getting everything together. But I do have a section in the book about that, and there are people that can help. And I think at the end of the day, if you can raise capital and get yourself enough funding to then take that product to market yourself, it can be a really positive experience. And for the most part, if you don't raise the money, and you don't get the money, you put in effort, but hopefully you won't be too far out of pocket because you haven't gotten in too deeply. So I like the whole concept of it so far.
What do you think about social media marketing? Do you think it's a good thing?
Yeah, I think it's essential today. My youngest daughter does my social media. Someone asked me once, how do you do a social media campaign? I said, raise your daughter and hire her. Because she
Yeah.
does it professionally in New York City for I won't tell the name of the company, for a large company. But it's for a lot of us old timers, it took a while to get involved in it. Some are not involved at all. But it is where it's at, and a lot of influencing going on, and you need to be proficient in it, and it's not going to get any less important. I don't know what your experience is, but that's what it seems to me.
It's one of those things where you're trying to see what actually hits. And for me, the biggest success I've had is when I post pictures from concerts or of musicians that I got to meet. That's usually when I get the biggest hits on Instagram, which just seems crazy, but it's like but the problem with that is you're dealing with algorithms. So, you can post about your book, you can post about
Yeah,
your podcast, but it's all about the algorithm. If
yeah,
so
and there's some learning experience. The question is how much money you put in. But I always find that too with music. Everybody loves music, even if it's not your style of music. They can recognize the Rolling Stones, or
yeah.
they could recognize, a jazz musician, but it's just kind of cool to be associated with that.
Yeah. So I mean, and my books tend to be rock star books, so it works out
Oh,
well for that aspect of it.
well, I was
Um,
just wearing my Woodstock shirt a few minutes ago. My mom didn't let me go to Woodstock when I was 13. I talk about it in the book, but I did get to go to the 50th anniversary last year, and
nice.
I'm also a follower of a lot of rock music. I said after 50 years, it's still about drugs, but today it's 81 milligram aspirin and Lipitor.
I got to go to my generation's Woodstock, which would have been Live Aid.
Oh yeah, of course.
So yeah, but yeah, and I will say that it was my first experience of actually, so I was 17, of actually watching people in the crowd sitting there snorting coke.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's a lot of good stuff out there. But it's been a long time. I'm a little older now, but that Live Aid, that was in Philly and London, right?
Yeah, I was in Philly. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the last time Pink Floyd played together. I think they stood at these opposite ends of the stage. Who the guitarist? David Gilmour,
David
and
Gilmour, yeah.
they were. I don't think they ever talked again after that.
I was in the crowd during Zeppelin, and that was like the big Zeppelin reunion for the first time. And at a certain point, my feet were not touching the ground because there was just this push. And I just remember my friends like, hang on, we'll make it through. And the funny thing about it is, apparently Robert Plant was so upset with the way they sounded that it's not even on the actual disc
Oh,
that they
really?
released for Live Aid. Most of it
Really?
has been cut. I think there might be one song, but most of it was cut because he really hated the way they sound. Now, being there, you
Yeah.
know,
Oh, yeah, yeah. But no, I'm a long time. I've been going to concerts since I was 15, but at 13, my mother took one look at Jimi Hendrix, who's my hero, and said, "There's not a chance."
you're like, come on.
Yeah, why not?
The first concert I ever went to was Olivia Newton-John, and
Oh,
that was during the physical tour. And I begged my dad to take me. So yeah,
well,
yeah,
you know what? That's awesome. And anybody who's in touch, and I still go today. Well, not in the last year and a half, but we still go to a lot of shows.
that's cool. That's very cool. I know we digress, but sorry
We're
guys.
going.
So if you could give one piece of advice to somebody who has an idea and they haven't tried to execute it yet, what would that piece of advice be?
Um, Thoroughly vet the idea, and not just with your friends and with your family. Try to talk to people who are experts in your arena, even if it's as simple as you invented a new hammer and you go down to see your guy at Home Depot, who might just be a regular salesman or saleswoman there, but they work in the hammer department. I consider them an expert, okay? And try to get feedback, and maybe go to a trade show when things open up again, like a hardware trade show if you have that hammer, and learn as much as you can. And before you get yourself too excited spending a lot of money on help and a lot of other things, vet the marketplace to make sure that you have something unique. That would be my first step.
Okay. Would you tell them to do it? I mean, would you tell them to take that idea and dream big, or just
Well,
be,
I would,
besides vetting, just to be
yeah,
cautious?
yeah, very, very cautious. There's nothing wrong with dreaming, um, but make sure you remember it's a dream and stay rational. Um, you always will get feedback from your friends and family telling you that it's great. You take that hammer, I guarantee you, if you take that hammer and show it to your mom or your brother or your one of your friends, they're going, oh, that's awesome, because they want you to feel good and they want to get away from you as quickly as possible. What you need to do is get more validation that you're onto something interesting and something really unique and it really solves a problem. Eventually, you're going to have to show that to maybe somebody who's at a show or the company. We get back to that non-disclosure agreement, that NDA you talked about before, but you want to get some validation by someone who knows what they're doing, because so many people go forth, they're just encouraged by people who charge them. Um, I remember once one of these submission companies, somebody as a joke took a straw, put a piece of spaghetti in it, and sent it in as a pasta saver, and they got a letter back saying, "Oh, that's a great idea," And you got to get beyond that, where you have confidence that what you're working on is unique and appeals to enough people, and that happens in concentric circles and steps. So make sure you get positive feedback. Stay within yourself. Don't do what I did and go to a trade show, take 110,000 orders, and put up $1 million to put in orders and ship all these companies, and then find out it didn't sell and nobody pays the bill, because
Wow.
that was 2 years of my life that almost destroyed me, and really gives me the platform to speak today. Quite frankly, surviving that failure. So take it in steps, do your research, stay rational, dream at night, but be rational during the day. I'm going to use that. Dream at night, but be rational during the day. How about that?
Did Now, when you said you had 2 years of this nightmare, how close to, I don't want to say
Oh, I was
bankrupt, but
close. I was very close. Well, I've had 9 of my own businesses. So some have been very successful, some early on weren't. I've been through the process of failing a couple of times, but not on a big scale. This really stretched my resources. Fortunately, I had done really well with Misto, really well with Stir Chef. So I had, well, actually, Stir Chef came after, but with Misto, so I depleted what I earned,
mhm.
but I did put my family at risk. I wasn't making any income for 2 years. I was in a warehouse trying to move out stock. I had this guy who had the product SmartSpin, which is my next big hit that we sold 12 million units of, calling me every month, and I couldn't help him. Thank God he waited for me.
Yeah,
And I finally got back on the wagon. And then, of course, I leveraged into working for companies. So I'm now at a point now at my age, I can retire now. And fortunately, we're in a good shape. But looking back, it's a lot easier looking back. But at the time, it was quite frightening. And it was really where I had to put that stop, identify, and address every day of my life, every hour of my life for many months. And it was quite meaningful. Usually I don't talk about these things in interviews. Nobody gets to this question, but it was quite traumatic. And I think it gave me the passion and the platform in which to do what I'm doing today. I think without it, I don't think I would have written the book or be so passionate.
that's kind of where I was thinking. I mean, if you've gone through this, you know the trials of what it's like to be an inventor and not have the success, and that gives you the platform, the ability to tell other people that, hey, I've walked your shoes. One thing that used to get me, because I started out in mail file and worked my way up to supervisor, was most of the other supervisors had no clue what the clerical staff did, and
Uh,
so they were on the clerical staff. It's like you have no idea how hard
no,
that job is.
no, it's so true. And I'm a mechanic really at the end of the day. I mean, I love people and love the sales part, but I'm really a mechanic. I started as a department store buyer, assistant buyer. I worked in the stock rooms. I had to price goods, source goods, mark them, do markdowns, handle those customers that came back in that were not happy. Like you, I worked myself up from the ground floor. Eventually became a buyer, and then went back and did it all over in my own business. So I have a 20-year platform, and you're right. People come along and just start giving out advice. It drives me, if I could just say it, it drives me absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
See people who have not had any success just completely BS. And a lot of times they even steal my lines. They're already stealing lines
Oh,
out of my book. I have a great line in the book that if you don't want to get ripped off, put grandma on the cash register. People are already using it. So anyway, whatever.
oh. So
But
I
you,
do.
you know
Go
the
ahead. Go ahead.
no, you know the drill. So.
Yeah. So for the person that's going to go to the trade show with his product, do you recommend that they have an NDA with them?
Yeah, well, if you're going to participate in the show with an exhibit, you need to have filed your patents. Okay, you cannot just go out there empty-handed because someone, even though they say don't take pictures, you will get your ideas stolen. So if we have inventor pavilions at a lot of trade shows, and you should at least have a what we call a non-provisional patent, which you can read about in the book, but it's what I call the big boy patent. You can file an inexpensive provisional patent, but you really need a little bit more than that if you're going to go into the public arena. You have to be prepared. If you're just going to walk the show and tell people about your idea, then you can do that a little bit more openly. When it comes to non-disclosure agreements, if you want to share something specific with anyone at a company, be it mechanical drawings or show them a video, no matter where you are, I would definitely sign a non-disclosure agreement. If you want to just tell them generally what you're up to, like I built this lawnmower that will mow your lawn at half the speed, are you interested? You can have that conversation. But once you get more serious, but trade shows are a great place where everyone in that industry is in one location, and within 2 or 3 days, you can get a real feel of what's going on, new products, where people are coming from, what real problems are, and great feedback. I'm a big believer in trade shows.
Yeah, I've gone to a couple for the television industry, and it was interesting. But that's why I wanted to clarify, because it's like I want to make sure that somebody who's thinking about an invention doesn't just say, okay, I'm going to go to a trade show and I'm going to go there and I'm super excited. And then I'm just going to tell them everything about
I
it. So
know.
it's like, no, no, no.
No.
Reel that back in just a little bit.
Slips, sink ships, I think my mom used to say.
Yeah.
But yeah, you got to be careful. You got to be strategic. You
Yeah.
need to plan and prep if you're going to go to trade. It's going to cost you a couple $1,000, so you got to use your time wisely. But I see some people saying, you don't have to go to a trade show. Just sign up with me and all. And I think the experience of walking to trade show is valuable. To participate even as an inventor and have companies come through and see your product is really invaluable. We run the largest inventor trade show pavilion at the National Hardware Show each year in Las Vegas, and so we have a lot of experience. But we've also done it at Toy Fair and Houseware shows and others, and so it's a real great experience. Again, I hate to say this, but I have a whole chapter on trade shows in the book. So if you're interested in Inventor Confidential,
Yeah, definitely. Inventor Confidential. I was going to say that one more time. We used to have the Houseware Convention here in Chicago. It was a pretty big one.
It was, and it will be there again in March. It was just because of COVID, took some time off. But I was just on the phone with them last week. I've been going to that show since 1979.
Oh wow. Okay, so you definitely know that show. Is there anything as far as one piece of advice to tell besides buy your book, besides buying Inventor Confidential, is there one piece of advice
I want 3 more wishes, right?
Is there one thing you would just tell, besides vetting, is there one thing to just inspire somebody that has this dream?
If you do things properly, you will know when it feels right. I'm going to say something weird here, but I occasionally pull this one out. Now, I've been married for 39 years, so I'm way out of but it's a lot like what I remember dating or what relationship building is like. It's all the same process. In the beginning, you've got to be careful, you just can't go out with anybody, or if you do, you've got to be ready for rejection. It could happen at any time. You might have a relationship that lasts a few months and then it falls off. It might last a few years, or it might last 39 years, or like my parents, 64 years. By the way, no relationship ends well. And
No.
think about it, because like my dad predeceased my mom by 10 years, so maybe it ended well for him. But in any event, I'm getting off track here. But the point being is this whole process of taking your invention out there is a lot like also building a relationship with another human being. It doesn't always go the way you think it will go. And it's not only because you think it's great, it takes 2 to tango, and there's a lot of signs there, and it can lead to heartache. But when it works, it's beautiful. And so when you've got the right feedback and you have the right, when you know it's right, no matter who your partner is, when you know it's right, it's an amazing feeling. But be selective, and just keep your head about you. So that's just another way to describe all that we've talked about today.
And one thing I will add is manage your expectations.
Yes.
Be realistic. While you may think you have $1 million idea, and you might, be realistic. Keep your feet on the ground, like you said. Keep your head on.
You kind of have to put yourself out there in order to, you can't be afraid and just stay in your room all day. But then, be realistic about that feedback and be open to that feedback and be listening to that feedback. Sometimes we don't listen to the feedback. So that's where the stop and identify comes in, because sometimes when you're back in the quiet of your office, stop. I will tell you this, every interview I do, I watch it later because I know that I've said 5 things. But if you really want to be good and at the top of your game, that's what you need to do.
Well, and another thing about stopping is sometimes when you stop and you're quiet, you can listen to your inner voice and you can trust your gut and your intuition that this is right or this is wrong. Because if it's wrong, usually your intuition is sitting there screaming at you going, run.
It doesn't feel right.
So, well, Warren, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I thank you very much. And thanks, gang, for tuning in. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.